Everyone thought revision management was boring for a Friday afternoon. How about specifications?
That's what I like to hear.
No, in all honesty, specifications do take a lot of energy and effort to develop. Once again, it's, if we take a step away from Archicad and BIM and think of just better information management, delivering our specifications in a smarter manner also needs to be addressed as part of that. So NBS are based out of the UK and they've been in Australia now, I think 2 or 3 years? 4. It's been a long time, Mike. We've been going to having lots of fun at Built conferences, but NBS have been down here in Australia. As I said at the start of the week, NBS are behind Uni Class 2015, and they have this wonderful tool called NBS Chorus, which I think only about 3 months ago or 4 months ago, you made accessible to Archicad and Mac. So Matthew is actually the pilot project here in Australia, and he's going to take you on a journey over the next 40 minutes. And it's his experience with regards to NBS Chorus and the way you can link your model to your specification. So thanks very much, Matthew.
As Nathan said, I've been given the glorious task of trying to keep you awake on a Friday afternoon with specification. It's very important. As I showed you yesterday, my rules for my talks, you can record anything. We've got some videos going here today. Photography's fine, take photos of any of the slides. That's my Twitter address if you want to tweet about me. Questions, yep, and I'll take those, and there's some CPD. And my most important rule about sleeping. I mentioned sleeping yesterday. You know what happens if you get caught sleeping. It's on. Okay. Thanks very much, Lachlan, for your wonderful comments about my specification, my door schedule document earlier today. This is already on Twitter, and it will go global. Always good to see. Thanks very much. Okay, so let's get started talking about specifications. So, yeah, I'm sorry, yet again, I do 70s and 80s TV references. Apologies for those who didn't grow up with this in the 80s. As a child of the 80s myself, coming home every afternoon after school and watching what was Monkey Magic, what we called Monkey Magic, but it was actually called Monkey and was actually called something completely else, actually, back where it was from in Japan. Yes, it's an Australian cult TV show from the BBC that was actually a redubbed version of a Japanese production of an ancient Chinese novel translated as Journey to the West. Something really complicated and specific. So, let's get on to our learning objectives today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is understanding the depth of the data structure contained within BIM. We're also going to learn about how to push non-geometric data around in our models. And then we're going to learn about the new NBS Chorus add-in for Archicad and how it works with BIM data to coordinate your BIM specifications with your model. So the story of Journey to the West starts with a monkey imprisoned under a mountain for 500 years for defying the gods in heaven. And I liken this to the amount of data that we get stuck with every day in our models. We have a wealth of information that sits in our model data that we never use, that we never share with our contractors, we never share with our consultants, because 99% of the time we reduce it to a drawing and send it out, and most of that information gets lost. When we talk about building information models and trap data, we talk about things as simple as walls. This brick wall, on a drawing, we can express the basic geometric information of it. So we talk about its height and its length and its width, and we give it some basic information. And on drawings, we have pen weights and cross-hatching and things that give it some description as to what it is. But the basics of it is that on a drawing, it gets basically defined as a brick wall at best. If you start to put more and more information into it, the drawings get confused and very hard to read. And so we end up trying to embed all of this data somewhere else. There's a lot of information there, and that's not even the start of what goes into a brick wall. We have bricks, we have mortar, we have execution into how we want the bricks laid. We've got information about how we want the courses set out. We've got information around how we want the brick ties done, around how we want the cavities flashed, around how we want the damp-proof coursing, etc. to be done into that. All that information, which is very difficult to show very simply on building information models or on drawings, without having to, obviously like they do in Auckland, do lots and lots and lots of 1 to 5 details. And I'm not advocating that we need to do more 1 to 5 details. In fact, the less 1 to 5 details we do, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So we want to take that information, which we can't show on the drawing, and we want to find a way to actually put it out there. Because if we're not communicating it to our contractors, they're not going to know what it is that they're supposed to do to execute our design work. It's the beginning of wisdom to say, I do not know. But it is the end of wisdom to say nothing and hope that everyone else knows what it was that you were thinking. Okay? We need to be able to communicate this information out to everybody. If we go back and look at the evolution of how this information has come about and how the building industry over the eons has communicated this information. Right back in the earliest of days, we were doing chalk scratchings on slate boards, and that was how we were communicating everything, and we were changing and morphing that every day as we went to the site and told them how to build the temples and how to build the pyramids. From that, we got a division though. We slowly moved away to the drawing board and we started to use paper and pens, and we came up with drafting conventions and ways of illustrating these things onto paper. And from our paper drawing board, we eventually moved into the digital age and we got to CAD. And CAD was basically just the drawings, but in a computer. There was no more information. There was no benefit other than speeding the process up and the ability to copy and paste and things like that. There was no more information communicated through a CAD system than there was through a drawing. From that, we've moved into BIM, and we've started to pull a lot more information into our models that define what these things are, what these objects are that we build with. They're buildings, they're walls, they're windows. So there's a lot more information that's intrinsic in the model. But unfortunately, most of the time, we convert that just straight back to printed drawings that go to site, get all scrunched up, and that's the end of them. So the information, again, gets lost. And we're making advances every day to get further than the drawing board and further than the printed work, and we're trying to deliver things with VR and on-site iPads and all these wonderful bits of information. But if we're not accessing that depth of data that's inside those models, we're still not gaining a lot more than we lost back with the chalkboard. Now, in parallel to this development of the drawing side of our communication, our specifications moved to the typewriters at the beginning of last century. And about 3/4 of the way through, they moved to Word documents. That's about as far as they got. That's about as much development for a long time that we saw. We had some extra things that we started to put into Word documents, and we could do hidden text and we could format them beautifully and we could share them via PDF. But that's about the level of development that we got to. We were kind of stuck back at the old CAD stage, and the specifications hadn't moved with us as the rest of our product moved into the BIM space. So I just want to talk now briefly about the different models that we've then seen of how model information, BIM data, and specifications can work. The traditional method, I'll call the fully detached method, where the architect looking after the drawing sits on one side of the office and the other architect looking after the specification sits on the other side of the office. And the entirety of the communication that happens between these two processes is shouting across the room. If you're lucky. Chances are you've probably outsourced the specification and you're shouting down a phone to the other side of town. As the Buddha says, as the traveller who drags his feet only raises dust, so too the specifier who writes in isolation only creates painful scratchings. If the information from the drawings and the specification are separated, they're going to conflict. They're going to have clashes. There's going to be a loss of the information transmitted from what the architect intends in the drawing and what the other architect intends in the specification, at best. So we then start to come up to a semi-integrated way of trying to deliver this information. So we then take our models and our drawings, and instead of shouting across the office, we actually find a way to extract some information out of our BIM and share it across the office to the spec writer, who then puts that together, in the hope that the information that we're sharing means something to them and it actually formats across correctly, without creating too much work for ourselves. But in the end, we end up always creating a lot more work for ourselves. Now, the basics of this workflow that we have developed in our office over the last couple of years, essentially we start off with our BIM, and we've got our model there of a nice interior space. And from that, our spec writer is going to start with a blank page, because at the moment we've given them nothing to work from. So from our model, what we'll do is we'll go through, and using the classifications that we talked about yesterday, because we classify everything in our model. At the moment, we were classifying everything in our model to the NatSpec classification system. So everything in our model was pulling out its NatSpec code. So we then produce this schedule out of our document, out of our model, and export it out as a list, as an Excel file. And the spec writer on the other side of the office picks that up and goes and creates a matching list of Word files that match all of those clauses that we came up with. They've manually got to sit there and go through NatSpec and find each matching clause and put it all together. And then they go through and they start to draft these bits of information. And so what we do then to semi-integrate this is that they work on the stuff that's completely non-graphical. They work on all of the general clauses at the beginning about the Australian standards that we should work to, and the requirements for submissions, and the requirements for cross-referencing, etc. And then in Archicad, we then try and come up with a way to create a schedule that kind of looks like what the NatSpec schedule in the back of that section looks like, as close as we can, as possible, with a lot of difficulty and a lot of blanks and a lot of confusion. And then we try and format it onto an A4 page so that we can try and squeeze it out in a way that, again, makes it look like it was written in Word. And then we pull those two bits together and we try and ram them together as a PDF and send that PDF out to the client or the contractor, and hope they don't notice how much work it took us to do that. And hope we haven't burnt the entirety of the documentation fee on doing that process, which we have. The benefit of that process is that the clients and the contractors we work with end up with a specification that they know and love, because it looks exactly like the specification that they got last time that was done in the very manual way. And because they're against the idea of change, they've got something they're comfortable with, so they won't complain about it and they'll just get on with it. The problem with that is that, as I said yesterday, we've created over 1,600 properties in our Archicad files just in an effort to be able to output those schedules in a format that kind of looks like it might belong in the back of a NatSpec specification. And managing all of them is a massive task, and somebody removing a property from one of them is a project killer, which is why backups are absolutely essential. So we do all this to make sure that it looks like we know what we're doing on the outside. But when everyone else sees a blue sky, there's always someone flapping his arms to keep the clouds away. So what we've now got, thanks to the NBS system, is that we've got Chorus. Chorus is a completely different way of looking at specification writing, well beyond the old system of typewriter and Word file, okay? It is nothing like what you're used to from other systems that you may be currently using in your offices. Chorus is built completely new. It's based on Uniclass. It's got all of the benefit of the classification system in it without all the drags that we have by having old Word files to go through. So now with this, what we can do is we can actually have a fully integrated approach to your specification. So what we can actually use is we can actually use this add-on that sits in between to connect live specification data, which is what it's become. It's specification data. It's no longer just words in a Word document. And our live data in our model, and we can actually connect the two. So rather than sitting on either side of the office yelling at each other, our two architects can actually work together on the project at the same time. Now, yesterday I showed this slide about the depth of model information. Now, on the left, we had our level 4 classification that had a couple of properties, and over here we've got our level 2 classification that had a lot more properties. Now, we talked about how much property information we needed to put in when we only went down so many levels of specification. The thing is, all that property data doesn't necessarily have to exist in your model. It can live outside the model. So what the Chorus system with this add-on actually allows us to do instead is to get down to a classification system, maybe only a classification as deep as level 2, and then use an external reference to where all that property information can be managed on a separate system. We keep the property load inside our Archicad file quite light. We keep our Archicad file quite nimble. And also the level of information that has to be assigned by our architects and our CAD technicians inside Archicad is significantly reduced, because instead it can be all managed by the external system of the Chorus specification system. So we also talked about all the different classes and classification tables yesterday that are involved. And these are all the tables that exist in Uniclass. Quite a lot of those, though, you'll notice don't actually have a day-to-day bearing on what we need in terms of specification. So we're going to pull a few of those out. That's the table we talked about yesterday with all of the different ways that all the different types of class work together. So we're going to pull out the tools and equipment and the CAD and the form of information because we don't really need those in the type of communication that we're doing. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop out some of the ones about complexes and entities and spaces and element functions for the moment because we don't need those either. And project management, we might come back to that later because that deals with preliminaries and things like that in our specification. But for the moment, I want to focus just on these three. So we're talking about activities, systems, and products. And we're probably going to drop activities as well, actually, for the moment, because systems and products are the ones we really want to focus on. So let's go back to our brick wall. We can continue talking about this as just a brick wall. We can classify it, though, as something better. So rather than calling it a brick wall, what we're going to do is we're going to call it a masonry wall single leaf system. Sounds really nice and complex. And we can give it that code. So we can give it an attributable code in that classification system that makes it more identifiable as what it actually is. But as well as getting that system classification of what that system is for that wall, we can actually, by doing that, we can actually pull in a whole heap of nested other classifications that then can exist within that. Because we have to have some form of adhesives. So we're going to have a product classification there for what the adhesives are for putting the bitumen waterproofing on the back of it. We've got the specification for the actual clay bricks themselves. We've got some damp-proof courses that we're going to have to specify and some more waterproof coatings, and we've got some foam strips for our expansion joints, and we've got some mortar, we have to specify that, and we've got the masonry cements that we have to specify that go into the site mixed mortar. So we've got all that information, but we don't want to classify that and actually attribute that to the wall because, as we talked about yesterday, we want to make sure that when we're classifying these things, we classify them to one class. So we're going to classify that with the system that makes up that wall, not 10 other classifications at the same time. But what we can do by linking this across to a Chorus specification system is that by coming up with the single classification for that wall to say that it is a part of the masonry wall single leaf system, we can actually use the deeper referencing within Chorus to cross-reference then to all of these other requirements that can be part of that. And they're all classifications. They just don't need to be directly attributable to that wall. So how do we do that? So it's an add-on that will go into Archicad, and this is the general look and feel for the add-on. So to start with, we have the main navigation window component of it, which gives you a direct interface to the NBS Chorus web interface. This is almost identical to what you'll see when you log into NBS Chorus straight through Chrome or Internet Explorer. It allows you to connect to the NBS projects and specifications. It allows you through that window to associate clauses to your model data, and it then allows you to actually get in here and you can actually complete specification details straight in this window live in your Archicad session. So you don't have to go out to an external system to edit your specification data or view your specification data. You can edit it straight in this window. You can also have it so that when you start selecting things in the model, the specification for those elements will automatically start to appear in here to show you what has been linked. The other parts of the add-on, we get a used clauses history window component. This portion of the add-on actually shows you which clauses have already been linked into your model data that you're working with. And if you happen to go offline, you can already use these already pre-attached clauses and attach them to other elements inside your model. So yeah, you can reuse or reuse clauses, and it also allows you to monitor and manage the associations. So yes, you can go through and select these and associate them to more elements, but you can also use it to go through and disassociate from the elements that you no longer want to attach those clauses to if you want to swap them over to another clause or something. We also have the disassociated elements section. I love the term disassociated, as if it's somehow been kicked out of the church or something. So disassociated elements. So the disassociated elements section identifies the disassociated elements in the model. It only lists from the active viewport. So if you're in plan view, it will only list the objects in that story that you're looking at. It's not going to tell you everything in the entire model unless you happen to have it in the 3D window with everything turned on, and then it will start to tell you everything that it can see. If you've got the layer turned off, it won't list it here as disassociated. So that way you can turn off the layers that contain things that you don't necessarily want to be specifying. Say if you've got layers that are containing your existing buildings for a renovation project or the neighbouring properties, etc. Turn those layers off and they won't turn up here as being disassociated, so you don't have to worry about trying to specify the building next door. The last bit of the add-on then is the workflow issues section. And this basically tells you when things might not be going the way you intended them to. So it helps you to go through and identify bits of the model or bits of the system that are not working. And we get two types of errors here. We get a yellow warning, which is a fixable issue. And the yellow warnings are usually fairly simple things that are easy to do. It's normally things like you're trying to assign a specification clause to an object that's locked on a locked layer or not reserved in teamwork. Fairly simple thing, and it will suggest to you, you want to reserve that first. The red warnings are a bit more serious. Red warnings tell you about things that you need to fix before you go any further. And these are normally bigger, more fundamental system issues, like that classification system doesn't actually exist in your model yet. What do you want me to classify this as? And again, it's fairly good in terms of giving you feedback and letting you know how to work through those. So that you can actually address those issues. So rather than just showing you stills of all of it, I'm going to try and do a live demo again. Try and do a live demo of this again. So we'll see how it goes. As I said to you yesterday, I've got a very good reputation of breaking things. I have broken this a couple of times, but that's mainly my fault, not its fault. I will try and get this to work, so bear with me for a couple of minutes while we try and load this file. Ooh. Crunch, 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 crunch. That's the first not good sign. Could be both. Disassociated means that there's currently not an association between an object, a clause from the specification, and that particular object that's in there. Okay, so I've at least got that up, but it's not replicating my screen. Okay. Remember these for today. Oh, that makes it much better. Go for it, go for questions, yeah. Yep, so the specification system from Chorus, so originally developed in the UK, we've now got Chorus available in Australia, and currently the NBS team is working to re-link all of the clause specifications so they work to the Australian standards, not the British ones, and reference all of the behaviours, etc., that we have in this country as opposed to the UK. There are a couple of things that you need to get used to in working with Uniclass. But they're things that I've had to go through when I've worked before with master format specification out of the US and other things. We call them TAPs. The Americans don't. So you can't go searching in the American system in master format for TAPs because they don't exist. I struggled the other day to put a floor waist into my specification because the Brits call it something else. I don't know what you call it, guys. But searched for hours for it, but eventually found it. But there is a little bit of language and cross-referencing there that you do need to get your head around, and we're actually working on it almost a how to learn British terms for building dictionary in the office, so that we can help people to find the right things. But it is slowly working, and that allows us to make sure that we get the right clauses. But yes, there is Australian standards references in there for all that information. And one of the things that you get out of this, and I guess also while that's loading, I'll show you just an exemplar specification. So this is a sample specification for a primary school. And this is what the output specification system looks like. And you can see, yes, it is very different to what you're probably used to in terms of your specifications, but it's fully cross-linked. It's designed to be an active document. You can print this if you really want to. If you want to destroy the planet, go ahead, print the damn thing. But as a PDF cross-linked, it's incredible because you can start to actually go into these clauses, and rather than having to go, oh, that framing member uses these cold form steel strip studs, I wonder where that is. Well, guess what? There it is. You just cross-link and hyperlink the whole thing through. Oh, mineral wool slab insulation. Oh, that's to this code mark certification scheme. I won't click on it here because of the network link I've got, but that will then take you to the code mark certification scheme so you can understand a bit more about that. Oh, this is to that standard. This will take you to a page that talks about what that standard is and what it entails, and then eventually you'll be able to cross-link across to that. If you've got standards access, you'll be able to know what standard to go and do and look all those up. So yes, there is Australianised content in this. The Australian content is constantly building, but in terms of the output, I'm falling in love with this format of this specification every day I start to use it, because it's much easier to find your way around rather than having to leaf through it. I mean, this one's a simple one and it's an 80-page specification. Who here has done specifications of more than 100 pages? Who's done more than 200? It's crazy trying to sit there and imagine someone on site with 200 printed pages trying to find the specification of the screw that they need to buy. Okay, so here's our building that everyone will remember from yesterday. So what I'm going to do is load the NBS Chorus Connect add-on and cross everything that I have. Come on, phone, work. Yes. Phone, keep working. Thank you. Okay, so I've now signed into the plugin and it's now going to load the NBS Chorus specification screen. Now, I said to you before, this is identical to what you'll see when you come in. So there it is. There's the screen as I access it in Chrome. There's my 3 projects that I currently have in there. And I go back to Archicad, and there are those 3 projects. So it's almost a one-for-one copy of the specification system that's live there. The great benefit of having these 2 completely linked is that, and you'll see in a minute how quickly they replicate between the 2 of them, is that you can have someone working in an Archicad session with this add-on open, adding clauses, and then someone sitting right next to them with the Chrome screen open, filling out all the detail in that specification as they go. So it doesn't need to all be edited inside here, even though you can use both sides of the system to actually do this. So I'm going to take my arc intensive specification, my project that I've created here, and I've got two specifications that I've created. I've got a prelims section and I've got my specification, which has got my construction documentation. And we'll just go in and have a look at this quickly, and you can see I've already started to put a couple of clauses in here. I've done some masonry walls, I've done some toilets, and I've got some standard polyethylene foam strips. But before I get into doing anything with those, I'm actually going to go back up a level. Come on, back up a level. That one. I'm going to go back up a level, and I'm going to start here and actually associate this specification to this model, to this project. I can tell you now it's not going to work. So specification, associate now. And straight away it asks me which classification system do I want to classify this to, noting that it's asking me to use a classification system, Australia Uniclass 2015. The reason it's doing that is it wants to do a one-to-one matching between the Uniclass system that the specification is written to and the same classification system with the same codes in your model. The problem being, I haven't actually imported that classification system into my model yet. So I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go back over and I'm going to quickly import that classification system, which we did yesterday. And there it is. It's now got the classification system available for me. And I'm now going to go back over to my add-on once it's finished thinking and tell it again, associate with the model. Yes, I want to associate the specification and I want to associate it to that Uniclass classification system that I've built in. And that little icon that's now turned up down here next to specification tells me that that section, that specification, is linked to something, so it's linked to this model. You can go back out and disassociate it and unlink it from this model if you need to. But once we've associated the model to the specification, we can now start to go through on each of these clauses and start to actually assign them to elements within our model. So I'm going to take all of the walls that I've got in this model because I know that they are blockwork walls, and I'm going to take this specification here for the masonry wall single skin and associate it with my model. The following will be connected and associated with the model. Yep, associate it now. And then it opens up that specification, and because I've got those walls selected, tells me these walls are now masonry wall single leaf systems. And you can go through and you can see the layout of that specification. So you can see I've already started to tell it there's a description for that and that it has a system performance and it's got a certain type of mortar. And if you scroll down here, you can see there's other clauses that have been crossed out. They're crossed out because I've gone through in the specification that I've been working on the Chrome instance and said, I don't need those clauses at the moment. So I've just parked them at the moment. I might come back to them if I need them. They're there as headers to remind me that I might want to use them in the future. So they're not being completely deleted. They won't turn up in the final document, but they're there just to remind me that I might want to put them back in. I've specified some aggregate concrete blocks. I've specified some movement joint components. And I've gone down here and I've got some execution requirements. And if I go down and have a look at this, all of those things that we saw with the blue capsules around them, they're now available down here as further information. And you can see they've already started to attribute with, okay, that needs aggregate concrete blocks. Obviously, that's the Australian standard that we do aggregate concrete blocks to. So you can then see that by specifying that one system and then by adding extra product specifications within the system specification, these walls now have linkages to multiple in-depth classifications with the system, but also the products that go to making up that specification. Does that make sense? It's Friday afternoon. Is everyone following me, or am I putting you to sleep? I'll get the camera out and take your photo again. I really will.
But nowhere in that process you need to actually get those walls specified and leaving
No, and the thing is, by telling it through the NBS add-on, that I want them to be of that, when we actually go and have a look at those walls and actually look at their classification, it's already done the classifying step as well. So you don't have to classify them first and then specify them. You can just select them and tell them what specification clause they go to, and it will classify them as part of that process. So what the add-on actually feeds it with, it links the specification clause to the classification in that classification system. It then also adds a few properties. And the properties it adds are these ones down the bottom here. Apologies if you can't see them at the back of the room. But there's 6 properties that it adds. NBS Chorus Clause ID, NBS Chorus Code, Chorus Title, NBS Chorus Prefix, and NBS Chorus Suffix. Now, shouldn't really edit any of them. The NBS Chorus Clause ID is a wonderful big GUI'd reference there that actually links to your specific specification clause. So that's the actual bit that the system's using to link the 2 bits of information together. Because you can have multiple instances of a classification. So if you've got 2 different types of blockwork wall, you can actually have blockwork wall 1 and blockwork wall 2 and have them as different type instances. So they'll have the same classification code. So what it uses is it uses that GUI'd ID to identify the 2 of them. But you can also, within the classification, within the Chorus system, you can then give prefixes and suffixes to each of those so that you can actually say, well, this is my masonry wall single leaf system type A, and this is my masonry wall single leaf system type B and type C and so on as a suffix to that. And then you can add that in here. That will automatically add that in here into those pieces of Archicad properties, which then means that on your drawings, for the printed output, you can then label those clause IDs. So rather than having to do long descriptions about what each of these are, I've now put those walls on here so I can actually take an out-of-the-box label, classifications and properties, and if I go into that label and say I want to create sorting and I want to do the NBS Chorus, I want the code, and then I want the title. And so straight away, I can be coding it to see that, yes, it's that specification code, and that's what it's called. It's a masonry wall single leaf system. Or if I had a prefix or a suffix, I could also add that in. So you can then automatically start labeling up your model with linkages to all of your specification data. So if someone is then on site without access to the model, they can then sit there and go, okay, that's the clause I'm looking for. They've got the PDF, probably on an iPad, do a search, there it is, I've got that section. So does that make sense? So that again gives you access to all of that information within here. We can also, if we want to, we can actually create more clauses in here. So I'm going to take my front door, I'm going to add some more content. So I want to go looking for, let's just do a simple thing and search for doors. Or what are we going to pick? Door assembly systems. Mike, that sounds like a good one. Okay, so I'm adding door assembly systems. Now if I go into the content section, I can see, yep, there's door assembly systems. And I can go in and I can actually start to write that. And it's bordered in, it's all empty at the moment because we haven't actually selected any of these properties. But you can see that all the information sections are there for that to start being described. And we can start going through this section and saying, okay, well, what are the suggestions? What have you got? Well, I need some material and product performance, so I'm going to add some information in there. The system manufacturer, I don't have any suggestions for that at the moment. They might know what they're doing with it. You know one, okay. It's good that we've got one. We can start to then pick some materials. So what sort of materials do we want? Do we want them to be aluminium or steel or wood? Yeah, we'd call that timber here. So you can go through and start to specify that. And then when I click save at the top, if I come down and have a look down the bottom here, you can see that it's added some information there. It's a subpart there for that, and it's added the property information about aluminium door frames. So it's building in all these products and everything as we go. And if I go back to my chorus login I've got over here for my specification, so my specifier who's sitting at his desk, you can see he's now got door assemblies. So they can see the clause that I've just added inside Archicad. So I can add the basics of the clause, and I can go through and make the basic suggestions. Well, I want them to be aluminium doors, and I want them to have, you know, some good hardware on them, and I want them to have some nice glass, and I want it to be tinted, and these sorts of things. And then hand it off to my spec writer who can go into this and actually go through and fill out the more detailed information as, okay, our standard is that the aluminium needs to be this, and that the glass needs to be these standards and these things. Okay. That's about it for the demo of this. If you want more information on the chorus system itself, the guys from NBS are here to talk to after this. I've only scratched the surface in what you can actually do with the chorus specification system itself. Most of what I've been trying to focus on in my testing over the last month has been on the integration of this add-on and how that works so that you can link everything between these. Certainly, we're looking towards developments of this, and as with everything in Archicad, we're always looking for ways to push this and develop it. I'm already suggesting ways to add to it, and I look forward to suggestions from everybody else in the room as to other things that they'd like to see in it as well, because I'm sure as a group, we'd all like to see systems like this be developed further. So that's it for my demo for the moment. Are there any questions from the room? Nando? It does work in hotlinks. I haven't done a lot of stuff with hotlinks and mod files at the moment. Most of my testing has been on solo files and teamwork files to see that, because teamwork's often the one place that we see add-ons start to have issues, but it works really well with teamwork. And because it's using those property fields and that GUID ID, there's no relationship to master IDs or any of that sort of information that comes in. So as long as you specify it in the hotlink and then bring it in, it should be okay, because that information shouldn't be being changed in the process. But obviously, if you're specifying it in a hotlink and then bring it in and then try to change something, there's going to be a few conflicts and stuff that you'll have to just be aware of and resolve because of the locked nature of hotlink files and stuff. But that's just the nature of hotlink files and properties anyway across the system. Go for it. So there's no linkage in terms of if I specify a red in chorus, it's not going to know that that door should be red and colour it red in the model. There's not that level of linkage between the two. I'd love to see some form of development that requires a lot more development on the Archicad side first, that gives us classifications and property information inside surfaces and fills and the like, that would then allow us to link information from this specification into building materials, surfaces and the like, so that we could actually start to have that interaction. But until there's the development inside Archicad to allow those properties and classifications to exist within those attributes, then there's not the data structure for Chorus to actually interact with yet. But that'd be one of the things that I'd love to see this do. But yeah, it requires more development from Graphisoft first. No other questions? Okay. Oh, hang on. Now we've got questions because Nathan's approaching. No, it doesn't create schedules for you, but the amount of information that you now have to put into schedules is significantly reduced, because the system that we were using with NatSpec, we were having to do quite extensive schedules that had a lot of information in them that really could have been pulled off as a much smaller clause, just linked to model data, rather than having to do all the specifying all the standards and everything, yeah. Suppliers, the standard that the glass has to be in my glass doors. I can put that in here now. I don't have to have a field, a property sitting there for the glass Australian standards so that it turns up in a schedule so that I can map it in. Yeah, the schedule is still good. The schedule's still good to have there, but as we were talking before with Lachlan's presentation as well, it's important that we think about what is it that the manufacturers actually want to see on these schedules, And from the discussions that I've had with suppliers and the like over the years, it's been, yeah, the schedule's nice and it does have all the information, but we don't want to see all this information again and again and again and again for every single door. What we'd much rather see is, okay, that's the specification. Yeah, we know that. Yep, we can make sure we've got all those materials. And the schedule should more be about how do we execute that particular unit, that particular door or that particular window. And the more holistic information, let's put that to the side somewhere else. Let's do that in a document that we can go, yep, we've got that. We don't have to look every single time. There's a question at the back. Yeah, one of the things that I would love to see is, even if it's as simple as a hot link, a URL link that comes across with part of that GUID ID that then allows you to, in BIMX, click on a wall, brings up the URL, and then you can click on that. And if you've got access to Chorus on your same iPad, which you probably do, then take you to that specification clause, because that would be brilliant to be able to hand that over to builders as well.
I made a test file.
Sorry?
I made a test file with BIMX connecting to Notion. So it does
work.
It works, but it's about having the smarts that a more integrated system that's built up.
Yeah, so I've already started
system.
talking to them. It'd be lovely to get one more property field in there that just gives us the URL that we can then start to work on mapping that into BIMX. Straight into it, yeah. If we could go to that next step to have this kind of level of information, that would be brilliant. Yeah.
Well, let's take another step, right? IFC. So you export your model in IFC, someone opens it up in Celebri Model Checker, BIM, Collab, Zoom. They click on the element, they click on this URL, it takes them directly to the project specification for that exact element. So you're taking a universal file format. It's not just about BIMX, because the thing is, you can do it in BIMX right now. You can choose which properties that you would like to incorporate, but once you get and generate a URL, it's essentially accessible for all opportunities.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, everybody.